Welcome, everybody, to the Beards and Bible podcast. I am so excited to be with you all this lovely evening, recording with my good friend Gabriel Joel Rutledge, sitting here in our high-tech recording studio. Gabe, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing awesome. Are you excited to be here tonight doing this episode?
I am.
Yeah, good.
I'm wondering, though, you agreed to record at this time yesterday, and then I texted you confirmed, and you told me that you ran 15 miles this morning?
Yes. Well, 14.75. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, we had to
That
get
last
in.
0.25, you just didn't want to complete the run? Is that what's going on?
I physically could not. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was drenched in sweat and just cramping, muscles wouldn't work anymore. But yeah, so we got Noah and his buddy Michael and I are training for a marathon here a week from this Sunday, October the 6th in Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's going to be their first full,
Wow.
and I'm trying to get them trained up. Yeah, so we got one more training run, and we're done training. Then it's the real deal.
That's awesome, man. Well,
Mm-hmm.
best of luck to you and your son. I think that's amazing that you're running it with him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's 16, is that right?
Yeah. What do you think? Is that a good idea? Should I be doing that? Should he be doing that?
Dude, if it was my kid and he wanted to do it, I would say shoot, yeah, absolutely.
Really? Okay.
Because, think about this, man. How many 16-year-olds can say they've run a full 5K, number one? How many 16-year-olds can say they've run a full 10K? How many 16-year-olds have run a full half marathon?
Mm-hmm.
Which he did last year when you and I ran our marathon.
Yeah, I think he's done 3.
Yeah, so the fact that he's not yet 18 and he's had 3 half marathons and a full marathon, think about what that's teaching him about perseverance and like intentionality and training and all this stuff, man. You're killing it, dude.
Yeah.
You're winning the dad game right now.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think he's just no, I think he's just driven just on his own. I think he's just he's a go-getter, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. We did a 5K up in northern Alabama, near Huntsville, this past Sunday. It's a really cool experience. Half of it, just about, is you run it through a cave.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Cathedral Cavern State Park, and beautiful cave, huge cave. But I brought Noah, Eli, and Micah with me, and they all ran the 5K. And it was cool because Noah got first in his age group. Micah, our youngest, got first in his age group, which there's only 3 kids that were 7 years old that were running it.
Wow.
And then Eli got 10th in his age group just because he was competing against his age group goes all the way up to 19, and he's like a 12-year-old. So yeah, it was really cool. And they loved it. They absolutely loved it. In fact, the following morning, Micah came down to breakfast wearing his the medals he's earned so far from different things. Like, so he has like a
the
5K.
Michael Phelps thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, a cute little 7-year-old coming down with these running medals on, and he's like, serve me breakfast. And I was like,
I'm a champion.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aiden ran his first 5K with me this summer. And he would go out with me in the mornings. We would run like a mile together, and then we'd come back to the house, and he would take a water break. I'd run another mile, and then we'd come back to the house, and he would run a mile. Like in training, basically, he'd never run more than 2 miles. But, for 7, I was like, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Or 8, I guess. He's 8. And so I think we finished in 38 minutes.
Nice.
His first 5K. So we ran all the way to 2 miles, and he had to stop and walk and run the last mile.
Yeah.
So, but I was pretty proud of him. He did a good job. So, yeah, hopefully by the time he's 16, he falls in love with the sport. But I will tell you right now, he's in love with the sport of football. So,
Merc.
Yeah, he's begging his mom and I to try to let him play tackle next year, because he's just playing flag this year. So
Is he going to be a Georgia fan? What's his outlook?
Dude, I can't do anything about that. He is a Tennessee fan through and
Oh,
through, diehard
okay.
Tennessee fan. Yep.
And Jenny's side of the family is Tennessee. Are they Tennessee fans?
They are. Her brother is
Okay.
a Tennessee alumni,
Okay.
and
All right.
so actually,
So
the
he's.
Saturday before our marathon last year, her
Mm-hmm.
brother, who was in the Air Force at the time, he got out of the Air Force in April this year. He did the flyover.
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember showing you those videos. It's just
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
That's really neat.
Yeah. So we went to Knoxville on game day, and I mean, he just was inundated by orange and went to the stadium. And yeah, so he's a lost cause at this point. So,
Just
oh, well.
jump ship on you, man.
Yeah. I'll pray for his soul. So that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a little bit of inflammatory rhetoric that I'm using to describe my son's favorite sports team.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that gets people hurt, right? Especially in the political sphere.
So you're saying that dangerous and divisive and inflammatory rhetoric can be a bad thing?
Yes, I think it can be unproductive. Yeah. Yeah.
Gabe, can you think of you don't have to name names or give details. Can you think of a political conversation that you've had with someone in the last 10 years that
10 years
basically evolved into the most unproductive, just dumpster fire? Can you think of a political conversation you've had that just got out of hand and turned? Okay. Tell me that story.
Oh man, there are almost too many to count.
Okay.
I just have this bad habit of just taking the bait on stuff like that sometimes. And sadly, a lot of it is done via texting or on social media or something, unfortunately, for all the world to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pile of poo that some of us just have to step in. And when we do, we realize it kind of after the fact. And yeah, I mean, especially this time of year, it's like, I think our election cycles being, around Thanksgiving, it just kind of like sets that platform for everyone to step in it a little bit easier, because you're all sitting there, and surely there's someone in your family.
Yeah, people we see once a year.
Yeah, and you got the people in your family who are just like, die hard. Donald J. Trump can do no harm, and then you got people who are like on the other side, dyed in the wool NPR listeners who are just Donald J. Trump is going to be the end of democracy as we know it.
An existential threat to democracy.
Right,
yes.
Right. He is going to terminate the Constitution of the United States of America, as someone would say. So yeah, it's always, now I kind of like, okay, let's grab the popcorn kind of mentality. I kind of I want to see how this plays out.
But you're a little bit wiser for the wear, because
Yeah.
you're getting older, wiser. You have children now of your own. You pastor church. So as a pastor, I'm sure, like me, you have been called in to mediate between different parties who have unproductive, very childish disagreements, right?
Yeah.
So at this point in your life, would you say you're probably a little more chilled out with this kind of stuff?
Yeah. I think I have a different perspective on it now. More, I would hope, more of a kingdom centered perspective, where I'm not disengaged. I'm engaged in the political process, but I'm way less emotionally engaged, way less emotionally triggered over things than I probably was 8 to 10 years ago, for sure.
Yeah.
It could just be testosterone levels have just decreased in my body or something too. But
it's all that running, man. You got to start getting back into the weights, get that,
I know.
Those T levels back up. Yeah. So this is what we're going to be talking about tonight, obviously. Dangerous political rhetoric that is a trending phrase right now that both the MAGA crowd is using and the raging lefties are using it too. Dangerous political rhetoric. I feel like so easy to see on the other side when they're doing it, but much harder to see when we're doing it. So yeah, that's what we'll talk about tonight. A couple scriptures. Gabe, why don't you read a couple of these scriptures?
Yeah.
To get us started, as this
Matthew,
is the Beards and Bible podcast.
Yeah, we've got to get some Bible in there.
Absolutely.
Matthew 5:9 says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." Ephesians 4:29, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building up others according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen."
Wait. So, are you saying arguing with your relatives at Thanksgiving dinner about politics that isn't helpful for building up others according to their needs? You're saying that doesn't benefit the people who listen?
No, unfortunately, it doesn't.
What?
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Okay.
I've never seen it have any positive effect on anybody. It sway them either way. It seems like both sides just typically dig their trenches a little deeper. And that's the thing about this dangerous political rhetoric, is like both the left and the right now in the United States of America is accusing either side of doing it, but neither side are stopping it. It's just still, they're still just hurling these things at each other and saying, "Oh, you're engaging in dangerous political rhetoric."
Yep.
But yeah, Proverbs 15:1, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." James 3:9 and 10, "With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. This should not be."
Wait. So if they vote different than I do, I can't curse them?
No,
what?
Sorry, Josh. No, I'm sorry.
But I thought if they're from the other party, they're half human and they're animals and they're demonically possessed. What? They're an existential threat to my existence.
Yeah. Or have you ever heard them called Christian Republicans will call Democrats Democrats? Have you ever heard that?
I have, actually.
There's we got to put a stop to that.
There's a billboard in my hometown. If you're going down I-75 past Dalton, Georgia, right before you get to Carpets of Dalton, I think it's exit 329 on I-75. Anyway, there's a huge sign that says, "Someday every knee will bow," and there's a little asterisk, and the asterisk says, "Even the Democrats."
You're strangely familiar about the location of this billboard. Like,
I'm warning any of my listeners that live in North Georgia. Would you send me a text or shoot me an email that confirms that billboard is still there? Okay.
So that's Google Street View.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you can do Street View because it's on the interstate, but
I don't know.
Are you looking it up?
That's a good question. No. Do you want me to?
No, keep reading the next scripture. I think reading scripture is probably more important than confirming the location of said billboard.
Matthew 5:44. "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Ooh.
I don't think we're doing that very well right now as Americans. It seems like we think being right is more important than obeying the scripture. Like, if I'm right, I get a pass from these verses. Like, being right is more important than loving our enemies. Being right is more important than praying for the people who may persecute me and hate me and call me names. Being right is more important than not cursing other human beings if they happen to vote differently to me, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm right, I can let unwholesome talk come out of my mouth. I can cuss and drop a well-timed curse word in there. Doesn't matter if it's not building up other people. Doesn't matter if it's not benefiting those who listen. If I'm right, none of that matters. And I think we're missing something within all this. The metaphor I've used often with my congregation is every 4 years we get intoxicated. Like, it's like we just get drunk and we lose our sobriety when it comes to discourse when politics are involved.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, we lose control of our emotions, which, that's the opposite of sobriety. Is our emotions get tethered to one political candidate or another, and you're right. We kind of lose. Would you say we're intoxicated? Is that?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think we're intoxicated with the allure of being self-righteous. I think self-righteousness feels really good. Like if we're on the right side of history and there's a bunch of people who don't see it like we see it, there's something that appeals to our pride. Like being right just feels good. And being more right than all these people who aren't makes me feel like I'm elite and I have the answer, and I can't believe all these dummies aren't seeing it like I'm seeing it. What's wrong with them? I don't know what it is about the human heart that self-righteousness just feels really, really good. Do you think that's what it is? Do you think self-righteousness may be why we do this?
Yeah, it could be that, but also it could just be some people have a genuine fear for what the future holds in our nation because they've been told that this is definitely going to happen or that's going to happen if this person is elected. Like the big thing, especially in the deep South, is like the political candidate going door to door and taking all of our guns.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. That's like, and so people are naturally, okay, taking guns away from Americans equals a blank check for any tyrannical ruler to come in. And so that's a legitimate fear. Okay. You can fear that. And so out of fear, which is an emotion, which the Bible says that we should not have of any human, by the way, but that's an emotion. It's a valid emotion. We then act on that emotion. So it could be self-righteousness, but it could all just be anxiety. It could be fear. It could be worry.
Yeah. It could be just passion, that we feel really passionate about it and we care about it.
Yeah.
So it's getting a lot of press right now this election year. But when we hear this term, dangerous and divisive political rhetoric, we hear it from the right. We hear it from the right because after the 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump, one of the things that has been pointed out, and I think I would agree, is there's been an escalation of divisive political rhetoric that has caused many to basically see the ends justifies the means. If we can eliminate Donald Trump, then that saves democracy, right? But then the same phrase has been used by the lefties towards Trump, saying that he was responsible for the January 6th insurrection because of his dangerous and divisive political rhetoric. So chances are there's probably someone listening to this right now that is nodding along when we say, well, the left is doing it. They're going, oh, yeah, man. But then when we say, well, maybe is the right doing it? They're not. No, the right's not doing it. And there's probably somebody that's shaking their head and nodding along saying, oh, the right's doing it. Donald Trump's dangerous. But then we talk about the left. They're, nope, not my side. And I would just say it's going on both sides. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the failed assassination attempts of Trump have definitely thrown a little bit of gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
And I remember from the Republican National Convention this year, watching the scene. So the Republican National Convention came after the first failed attempt on Trump's life.
Yeah, like a week
and I remember Hulk Hogan getting up and saying, kind of paraphrasing him, he said basically they tried to kill our man. Right. They tried to end his life. They're trying this. Yeah. Who is the they? And then as he's doing that, he's ripping his shirt off, and under it is like a "Make America Great Again" shirt.
Trump,
and he's
Trump
like MAGA mania, and he's like saying this. But the rhetoric of they tried to kill him, and then everyone's of course going ballistic, screaming and cheering, and it's like, well, hey, let's hold on, Hulk Hogan. Like, we don't really know for certain that was a conspiracy from the left to end his life.
That's just like how you were like, excuse me, hold on, Mr. Hogan.
Yeah,
hold on, Hulk Hogan.
But the damage is already done, right? So
Yeah,
this idea that Kamala Harris's campaign or Biden's administration is trying to off Trump because they see him as a threat is already well entrenched and implanted in a lot of Republicans' minds at this point.
sure.
So when the second attempt happened, everyone was like, "See, told you so." See, and it's
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So dangerous and divisive political rhetoric is a loaded phrase. So anytime you hear somebody use that, we have to be really careful with like what does that mean? Okay, so basically this is inflammatory or divisive language that's used in political discourse that incites conflict or division, right? So it's not where we're talking about policies, I disagree with this party on policy, or we're talking about decisions made, or we're talking about ideologies. It's a step beyond that. And we'll unpack that and we'll kind of look at maybe some examples in history of that. But it's intentionally using expressions intended to provoke strong emotions like anger, fear, or hostility. So again, we're not talking about, hey, I disagree with these people on policy, ideology, decisions that were made, yada, yada, yada. It's, I'm angry, I'm scared, and I hate these people. And I'm going to use language that tries to stir other people up to feel like I'm feeling.
Right.
Do you think that's a fair definition? Okay.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. So aspects of this speech. Obviously, the first is the use of emotional language. So appealing to fear, anger, hatred, stoking outrage rather than encouraging thoughtful debate. For example, calling political opponents enemies, traitors, threats to democracy, deplorables. I'm trying to think of other examples. Idiots. Ann Coulter. Do you remember Ann Coulter? I don't know if she's still doing what she's.
Oh yeah, yeah.
She called the Democrats retards on like a talk show.
Yeah.
And people were shocked and appalled, but she defended her use of that word. It's like,
yeah.
So it's interesting to note during periods of war or conflict, sometimes leaders of certain nations or even the military refers to the enemy as almost subhuman, using demeaning language to rally people. So during the Vietnam War, Asians were often called gooks. During World War II in the Pacific, sometimes Jap was considered a pejorative. They're subhuman. They're not actual people. They're Japs. Krauts in World War II, World War I for Germans, right? I'm trying to think of other examples of that.
But yeah, you're right. It's this effort to dehumanize. I mean, it's been used by every race against another race at some point in human history. Right. I'm sure it's like, if you can make them out to be not human, then you can convince people to do all kinds of horrible atrocities to that people group.
Yeah. Well, and you convince the people around you that the problem in our nation is not caused by failed policies or failed decisions. It's caused by those people. It's the anonymous they, right? So they're trying to kill him. Okay. Who is they? And that's a massive statement. They all are trying to actively kill him and in his life. Man. So the next aspect of that would be exaggeration or falsehoods. So dangerous rhetoric may include lies or exaggerated claims. Statements distort the truth, making a situation seem more dire than it really is. And that can push people towards extreme reactions. For example, saying that a certain candidate poses an existential threat to democracy. Gabe, unpack that for me. What does that actually mean? If there was a certain candidate that posed an existential threat to democracy, what would that candidate do once elected?
Yeah, they would have to. I mean, some big ones that stand out to me would be like eliminate term limits, presidential term limits, suspend components of the Constitution, maybe suspend some of the Bill of Rights,
right.
Maybe do things like pack the Supreme Court with people of their political persuasion. So yeah, I would say those things would definitely erode the political fabric of a republic like ours. But we don't see any real evidence that anyone's going to do that on either side, honestly. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that both candidates are going to be good for the United States of America, but
right.
We don't see them just. I doubt Kamala Harris, when she gets in office, is going to be like, let me just cancel or suspend the First Amendment.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, any sort of campaign is basically that person dating the American people and courting your vote, right? So we could be getting false advertising from either candidate, and when a candidate comes into office, their track record is, that's the proof of who they really are, right?
Yeah.
But we have the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, and we have the judicial branch. Our founding fathers thought this through and created something called the balance of power. And so while I would say the federal government has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and that concerns me greatly, and I think we're seeing abuses of, in certain cases, these branches of government. For an elected official to essentially scrub all of that out in one 4-year term would be a pretty remarkable and unexpected thing. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. It's a pretty hard thing to do.
Yeah, that could happen, right? I mean, it could happen. Who knows, right? It could happen. But is it likely to happen given things like there are 3 different branches of governments, we have balance of power, we have things like impeachment, all that? Like, probably not. Right? So that seems like an intentional exaggeration for the purpose of making a situation seem more dire than it really is. Pushing people towards an extreme reaction, like, well, therefore we have to assassinate this person, because if we don't, then America is going to turn into a third world country with a dictator, and we can't have that.
Right. I'm just looking something up here. Be interesting. Actually, one of the biggest threats to the republic and our democracy is probably the ability of presidents to make executive orders. Because that can kind of skirt around a lot of the legislative process,
right,
in the United States. And I was just trying to figure out. I'm not going to be able to find it, I don't think. But
like
which
the amount of
presidents?
executive orders?
Yeah. Which president signed the most executive orders? It looks like, just doing a quick search here, it was George Washington. Well, no, let me see. Total order. No, it definitely wasn't George Washington. Sorry, I was looking at it wrong. There's a chart here. Okay, wow. Someone did, goodness, 3,721 executive orders while in office.
Who was that?
That is FDR, which I
think I'm looking at the same chart. Yeah, that makes sense, because he was during wartime and the Great Depression and the Big New Deal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so
second to that would be
Woodrow Wilson.
Potentially, yeah. Let me see. Is that what you see?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense as well. Both pretty progressive presidents who, Woodrow Wilson, and then looks like Calvin Coolidge. So yeah, that's interesting. But I think honestly, that's probably one thing that our founders probably underestimated being exploited in our nation was presidents signing executive orders.
Interestingly, the last 4 presidents we've had, George Bush signed 291. Barack Obama signed 276.
Interesting.
Joe Biden signed 130. Donald Trump signed 220, and that was just during one term. So, I mean, that's actually quite a bit.
Yeah.
For a one-term president. So, yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
That is super interesting. Yeah, FDR leads by far.
A long stretch.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about World War II, if you think about, the Great Depression, you think about all the stuff that he did,
Yeah,
and
so
he was a pretty progressive president as well.
Yeah. So, and he had 12 years in office total.
That is true. Yes.
And so but that still has him signing an executive order almost one per day on average.
Yeah. Which is kind of crazy. And under him, really, the federal government grew.
Oh, yeah.
Massively. So,
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, exaggeration or falsehoods. One example I have here in the show notes is McCarthyism. Senator Joseph McCarthy was a U.S. senator that basically led a movement called the Red Scare. And he was basically trying to find out if there were any people in positions of government or in public life that were guilty of communist ties. And it was like the slightest little link to someone who had any sort of link to being a communist, the exaggeration and the falsehoods that were created to basically pin them as a communist it's crazy. Did you see Oppenheimer? Did you watch that movie?
I haven't. I really need to, but yeah, not yet.
Yeah, so it shows like what happened to Oppenheimer after he was credited for helping get the atomic bomb thing going. He was caught up in the Red Scare and basically lost his entire career,
yeah,
because of that. So it's kind of crazy. The next attribute of inflammatory and divisive and dangerous political rhetoric would be an us versus them mentality. We don't see that in our world today, do we?
Yeah.
This is essentially a framework where one group is portrayed as morally superior, or that one group is portrayed as being under attack, but the other group is seen as dangerous or evil. And this type of language always focuses on, I would say, number one, dehumanizing the other side, breaking down empathy, and encouraging hostility. So what are some examples like today that you see of that, Gabe?
You kind of see it on both sides, honestly, both sides of the political aisle in the United States. There's us versus them framework.
Yeah.
I mean, you have in the United States of America, you have all kinds of those us versus them frameworks going on. You have religious, non-religious, right, left, you name it. So, fortunately, you don't see a lot right now of the dehumanizing. We're saying, and especially along racial lines, you don't see that.
Yeah.
But that could be something that develops later down the road.
Well, so not to bring up what we talked about last time with the Haitians eating cats.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, so Springfield, Ohio, if you missed it, has been, there's been an influx of Haitian immigrants to Springfield, Ohio. And the word on the street is that many of these Haitian immigrants come to this city and they've been given extreme amnesty because of the Biden administration. And they come to this city and they don't really know how to live in an American town. And so there's whole sections of this town that are reportedly being turned into little pockets of the ghetto in Haiti. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah.
And so at the debate, Donald Trump said they're eating cats. So they're going to neighbors' houses and stealing cats and eating cats.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now is that happening? That's the thing. The Democrats are saying that is racist, horrible, dangerous political rhetoric because that's not happening. The Republicans are saying yes, it is happening, and like looking for examples of it happening. So I really think that the Republicans' path to the White House involves them finding a real example of a Haitian eating a cat. And if they can find that, the road to victory is clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because that statement might be untrue,
Mm-hmm.
but people who are opposed to Donald Trump have taken that and run with it as being a false statement.
Right.
And in doing so have completely dismissed the legitimate problem that's going on in our nation, which is we seem to have a problem with letting just anybody and everybody into our country and giving them a status of asylum seeker without thoroughly vetting them, as opposed to streamlining the vetting and legal immigration process in this nation.
See, but what you just said is you're talking about policy. You're talking about like solutions and ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's far more productive than the us versus them. Like, here's a group of people who are a threat to us. They're eating our cats.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, like,
yeah.
So,
because I think both sides know that if you're gonna win this election, you've got to hit people in their nerves. You've got to hit them in an emotional nerve. And that's why I don't think RFK made that much traction and gained that much popularity, because he was the most civil candidate out there.
Right.
He didn't make, I can't remember him making any personal attacks on both Biden or Trump. He kept it pretty civil.
Well, and he talked about how broken the system is. That's more of what he spent his time talking about. Yeah.
He presented coherent policies. I don't agree with many of those policies, but he presented really good policies. Was well spoken, sounded polite, respectable, and Americans just didn't like that. Americans were just like, you know what? No, we want like angry guy or angry woman or this person who's going to resonate with me because I'm scared, and this person who's going to resonate with me because I want something free.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So the us versus them mentality, we are seeing that. And that's definitely a part of it. I think the most extreme example of this is during the rise of the Nazis to power in Germany. Joseph Goebbels, in the propaganda machine of the Nazi Party, essentially portrayed the German people as being under attack from other undesirable groups like Jews and Poles and others that posed a threat to their ethnic and racial purity.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that works is essentially like they're out to get you in your way of life. And so the us versus them justified the persecution and, the expulsion of them. And then, eventually their genocide. So thankfully, I don't think we're there yet, thankfully. But history has something to teach us about that. This is how far it can go if we're not careful.
Yeah.
Finally, the last aspect of it would be escalating conflict or violence. Words have consequences. Words can lead to action. I think the fact that one of our candidates for this upcoming presidential election has had 2 failed attempts on his life is proof that words have consequences and words can lead to action. When rhetoric is used to incite fear and hatred and anger, eventually people want to act out on that. And they act out on fear, and they act out on hatred, and they act out on anger through things like violence or aggression or rebellion. And this crosses the line from just words into something far more dangerous. So things like protests, riots, terrorism, assassination attempts, these things happen when people are provoked to act out of fear, out of hatred, or even self-preservation. Gabe, are you familiar with the Rwandan genocide?
A little bit, yeah.
It's a fascinating and horrifying event in history.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, another example of tribal conflict in Africa, Central Africa, where one tribe was dehumanizing another, and because of that, they were willing to commit mass genocide against that tribe to completely wipe them off the map.
Yeah, so during a only a couple month period, it was from April 7th to July 19th in 1994. So about 100 days. The Tutsi minority ethnic group were killed and armed by Hutu militias. And so the most widely accepted estimate of how many Tutsis died is 500,000 to 662,000 men, women, and children. There was somewhere in the neighborhood of 250,000 to 500,000 Tutsi women who were raped during the genocide. And what's really interesting is it all started on the radio. So these two tribes were against each other, and there was this civil war that was raging, and the Hutu majority was basically stirring each other up, basically saying that it's the Tutsis who are like, they're threatening our way of life. So they want to destroy our country, calling them cockroaches. That was the pejorative that called the Tutsis. And especially young adults, they were the ones getting stirred up. And I think that's the way it is with most political extremists. It tends to be young, angry men. And so, the Rwandan Patriotic Army. So, calling the Tutsis dangerous, calling them cockroaches. And so the Hutus took those words literally, and during a 100-day period, almost 1 million people. Actually, the official Rwandan constitution states that there were 1 million people killed during the Rwandan genocide. And this isn't like something that happened like 100 years ago. This is 1994.
Yeah.
So words have consequences. That's an extreme example, but I think we're seeing the impact of this kind of language in real time. That's an erosion of civil discourse. So we have forgotten how to have respectful disagreement. We don't know how to have productive conversations. It always seems like... Have you gone back on YouTube and watched the debates from like Bush, Clinton, and Ross Perot?
No, are they just totally different, I would assume, right?
Dude, it is like the most decaf milk toast. I mean, it is nothing compared to what we've seen the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's a complete circus now.
It's turned into professional wrestling now.
Yeah, it's sad. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's directly related to the use of the kind of language we've been using. So we don't know how to have a civil discourse. We don't know how to have a civil discourse at Thanksgiving dinner. We don't know how to have a civil discourse people at a coffee shop or an airport. It's almost like...
Well, I think too, like both political candidates right now running for president, they know that this is a day and age where it's like you chop everything up into 4 to 5 second clips.
Yeah.
Pastors do that with sermons. You take all these little things and you make 4 to 5 second sound bites, and that can make or break your candidacy. And we saw that with cats and dogs stuff. We see that with some of her word salads that she tends to put out there.
Yeah.
And they know, like, I mean, this can be a complete dumpster fire debate. We don't have to have actually like intellectual conversations here, which are going to solve problems. we just have to make these quick little statements and platitudes, like she hates cats and dogs, she hates Israel, she hates
Yeah,
Arabs.
exactly. She hates Israel. She hates Arabs. Yeah,
and that just gets pumped out on the internet and circulated, and
all right.
that makes
He wants women to not be able to have access to health care.
yeah.
That's one that's I'm like, okay, that's quite the step, right?
And shame on Americans for not being smarter than that.
Yeah.
I would say a lot of voters in the United States of America right now are probably getting their news through Instagram and TikTok and these little clips that are circulating on there, little memes and or SNL. Shame on us for not being more intelligent and thinking critically on these topics.
Yeah. Yeah. So not only does this kind of language erode civil discourse, it leads to an increase of polarization, in the sense that polarization is like there's no middle ground anymore. There's no if you're moderate in anything, people accuse you of being a wussy, right? So if you're a raging moderate, then people just basically say, "Well, you don't have the courage to take a stand," right? And it's just that, man, we don't even know how to find common ground,
right?
And so people have been driven into opposing camps, and then this kind of language can incite violence or hostility. Again, to failed assassination attempts, right? People who feel threatened or victimized by rhetoric or stirred up by rhetoric are more likely to act out in harmful ways, through all sorts of stuff: physical violence, protest, civil unrest, any manner of it. So our words do have consequences. Now, it's easy for us to nod along with this, thinking of, Don Lemon or Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson. I didn't say his name right. Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity, right? Whatever pundit on the opposite side that you think is the devil, right? But man, what about us? Like at Thanksgiving dinner, right? What about us on Facebook? What about us at church? Like, shouldn't we be looking in the mirror before we start pointing the finger at these no-name pundits on the other side that we'll never meet? So, Gabe, let's talk a few questions as we land the plane.
Let's do it.
How can we discern between constructive criticism of policies, politicians, and parties, and what is dangerous political rhetoric? How do we know the difference?
Yeah, I would say if your emotions are being stirred by what this person is saying, be careful. Maybe just do a little digging, do a little fact checking. They may be partially right onto something, but it's kind of upholstered in emotional or untrue political rhetoric. So just do a little digging. Just kind of be objective. Take a step back and do a little research.
Yeah. Are we saying that it's wrong for you to have a strong opinion about policies, politicians, or parties?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
That's good to have strong opinions on that. And it's good to have good principles when it comes to political issues.
Right.
But it doesn't mean you have to treat other people like they're dirt bags because they disagree with you on that.
Right. Yeah. How about the teachings of Jesus on love, forgiveness, and peacemaking? Let me read some of these verses, and then let's just think about that. Matthew 5:44. I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. How does that apply to political discourse in an election year? Does it apply? Do we get to just throw it out the window and say that doesn't apply to me now? That doesn't apply to me now. It's an election year. Sometimes things get nasty. You can't help it. It's just an election year. Sorry, Jesus.
No, yeah, 100% applies. Man, yeah, it applies more than ever. Being the verses about being sober-minded apply more than ever. Because I think that's kind of where it starts with that emotional intoxication, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
We all like to get our news from our own favorite sources, and that whips us up into a frenzy. And then when we run into somebody at the grocery store, at a church, or at Thanksgiving who doesn't get their news from that place and they get their news from somewhere else, it's like you want to lock horns with them because clearly they're an idiot. They need to be educated.
Which is so funny that we think somehow us educating them is going to change their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is educating them in a angry, divisive, and condescending way. That's not going to change that. Mm-hmm. Nobody's mind has ever been changed by that. But it's funny
it's more of like it's more of like a political, or not a political, emotional letting off of steam than anything else. It's not it's not a discourse. It's just you just releasing that tension that you've been, slowly building up.
Essentially, it is unwholesome talk coming out of our mouths. It isn't helpful because it's not building anybody else up. It's not helping or benefiting the people who listen, right? So Ephesians 4:29 would say, don't let that happen. Don't let that come out of your mouth because it's not helping. It's not pointing people to Jesus, right? So, gosh, man, how do we love our enemies in this election year? Like, how do we do it?
Well, I think first and foremost, we get our heads out of whatever news outlet you're listening to and get your head back into the Word of God. This nation, while it is a great and wonderful nation in many ways, it is not the kingdom of God. It is not eternal. And while I want it to be around for much longer, we have to understand that, Christ's return is not contingent upon there being a nation state on the globe called the United States of America. He's going to return when he wants to return, when he, that time is come. But get your head out of that sphere and into the sphere of like, I've been so blessed to live in this nation while God put me on this earth. I need to be engaged and vote. And at the same time, my priorities need to be winning people over to the kingdom of God, winning souls over to that kingdom, and thinking along those lines. And I think automatically that kind of declaws a lot of the rhetoric that we will bring to the table. And it makes it more about the, eternal destiny of the soul, which you're having this discourse with. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Okay, so what about one of our listeners that is going to go to a family Thanksgiving dinner in a couple months, and they're going to be sitting around the kitchen. There's going to be a shrimp cocktail and box wine, and their aunt's little crescent rolls that she makes every year, and even some buffalo chicken dip.
That's so just weird delicious. Thanksgiving dinner so far.
Those are the hors d'oeuvres. Okay.
Shrimp cocktail for Thanksgiving. I don't know.
Calm down. Those are the hors d'oeuvres, right? You got a turkey in the oven.
Okay.
So then out of nowhere, his Uncle Bill just starts up with, "Can you believe what they blah, 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 blah." And then his Uncle Dan's like, "Oh, I know it. Blah, 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 blah." And there's Uncle Bill and Uncle Dan just going back and forth. Blah, 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 blah. Right? And there's our buddy, and he's like halfway into his plate with buffalo chicken dip and shrimp cocktail. And he loves Jesus, and he's like trying to figure out the best way to still engage in this discussion.
Yeah.
And love his uncles, but he doesn't want to lose his Christian witness. What does he do?
And so he's going to reflect on listening to this Beards and Bible episode. And the time that Gabe said, just enjoy your buffalo dip or whatever it is you're eating. Get yourself another helping of sweet potato pie and Just
they haven't served dessert yet. It's hors d'oeuvres.
Okay.
Yeah, don't do that.
I would say, there is the passage that Jesus says, "Don't throw your pearls before swine," which just is a way of saying that if the audience in which you bring something up is, for certain is not going to entertain that topic or that rebuke or that exhortation, just don't bring it up.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think you have to gauge the situation, read the room, and decide if I'm going to push back on what these gentlemen are saying, these family members are saying, is it at all going to be productive, or are they just going to gang up on me and take out their frustrations on me at that point? Whereas I think if someone comes to you and is sitting next to you and they begin to ask you questions about, hey, I'm having a hard time deciding who to vote for this year. Run some thoughts by me. Do you know who you're voting for? Why? That's going to be a whole different conversation, right?
Sure. Yeah. So you're saying gauge the temperament and receptiveness of the participants in said conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
And if temperament and receptiveness is not there, and there's already inflammatory language that's happening, and they know that's inflammatory language because it's the use of emotionally charged language, there's exaggeration and falsehoods, there's an us versus them mentality, there's an escalation of conflict in the language, then it's probably not going to be a constructive conversation about political discourse. So maybe they excuse themselves and go watch the Detroit Lions losing to whatever NFL team is going to be beating them.
Or there's probably an epic game of freeze tag going on outside with all the kids, and your time is going to be better spent just playing freeze tag with them or whatever. Frisbee,
unless you ate too much buffalo chicken dip.
Yeah.
In which case, freeze tag is probably not a good idea. Yeah. Okay. I think we just gave people some great tips on how to survive their Thanksgiving this year.
Yeah.
That's the good part about having a football game on at all times during Thanksgiving dinner. If you can pop in a conversation and the conversation is just awful, you can just excuse yourself and just wander into the living room where there's a game on.
It's true.
Yeah. Even if you don't like football, like you, Gabe.
It works with mother-in-laws. It works with politics.
Yeah. God bless the NFL on Thanksgiving Day. Well, Gabe, we've had a lot of laughs tonight, but this is a very, I think, critical topic. And I pray and hope anybody listening to this tonight takes these words to heart. And man, if you've been guilty of using this type of language, man, welcome to the club. We've all done it at certain times. We're human beings. We're emotional beings. We get scared. We get angry. We feel unloving feelings in our heart towards others. And I think that's why we need the gospel. That's why we need the Holy Spirit. It is not natural to love our enemies, which is why we need the supernatural grace of God at work in our lives. And so, our faith is tested during times like this. But we can't just hang our faith up and choose not to believe certain verses during the political year. We just can't do it. So, well, Gabe, my friend, you look like you need to eat some carbs and go to bed, mister.
This is true.
Yeah. What's on the menu for you for your late night snack?
Probably Golden Grams. Like cereal. Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
With 2% milk?
Yeah. So we get milk from a dairy.
Ooh.
That like just straight up from the udder.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it is creamy.
Do you take your bowl out to the cow?
No, we just go to a dairy and we buy milk jugs there. It's like you have to shake that milk jug up. Yeah, it's super creamy.
My goodness.
Man, it goes down smooth.
It's like a milkshake.
It's like drinking like melted butter sometimes. It's like cold melted butter.
The way you're talking about this said milk,
I know,
is making me uncomfortable. So
it's a little bit awkward.
I need to sign off because we're getting to some emotional discourse even now. So
it's exhaustion.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for listening. If you found our conversation helpful or you have feedback, or if you live in North Georgia and you know the location of said sign I mentioned earlier, send us an email, beersandbiblepodcast@gmail.com. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.